Ninja Gaiden 3 as a game took the bold, fearless step of asking the question, what if Metal Gear Rising was just really boring? Which is actually pretty impressive when you realize it came out a year before Platinum's action spectacle masterpiece in 2012. And if you're sitting there thinking like, I have no idea what I'm talking about because Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge is actually a fairly solid action game which occasionally flirts with being enjoyable, then prepare to have your socks blown off. If you aren't wearing socks, they will be provided. Because that's not the only version of Ninja Gaiden 3 in existence. No, there's a much more forbidden, seductive version of Ninja Gaiden 3. One that whispers to you promises of forbidden pleasures.
Not from a Jedi.
On par with the sublime experience of the original Ninja Gaiden 2. That version of the game is simply called Ninja Gaiden 3. Your reasonable confusion stems from the fact that it's impossible to buy the original version of Ninja Gaiden 3 outside the secondhand market now. But unlike Ninja Gaiden 2, where the devs just up and lost the source code, this time negligence was replaced with something far more malicious. They memory holed the game intentionally. Yeah, they were so embarrassed by it that it's been completely scrubbed from every storefront and collection. Which begs the question, what exactly is so bad about the original version of Ninja Gaiden 3 that Tecmo had to MIB the population at large and pretend it never existed? Plus, today we're answering that question. Let's dive into the original Ninja Gaiden 3 and find out what sordid secrets lie beneath Ryu's ninja mask. 5P316, and you'll be greeted by a QTE prompt to remind you that we have our feet still planted firmly in the 7th generation and are not going anywhere. Yeah, it's one of those games. We just have to dive into the action the moment you pop the disc in. No menu, no tutorial, we're just off to the races. Once Ryu is done carving our faceless antagonist in a hamburger maze, he takes a moment to farm by ripping his mask off to remind us how goddamn beautiful he is, before diving off a rooftop to fight the final boss of the game. It's doing that classy thing where it foreshadows the climax first so you get a taste of the stakes involved. Which in this case involves fighting a giant naked woman with a doll face, as all ninjas must do on their path of the warrior. Except instead of jumping into her cleavage and making himself comfortable like any sane man would, he opts to cut her in half, which is a choice, I guess. But of course, that was just a taste of what's to come. And it's not long before we're thrown back into the current day, with Ryu getting a visit from the military. Seriously, at this point, I'm just starting to think that Japan's self-defense strategy is just a note that reads deploy ninja, about a terrorist coup that's going down in jolly old London, which apparently will only end once Mr. Hayabusa himself shows up to put a stop to. The first problem this game runs into is that Ryu talks a lot. Before now, Ryu had maintained a very Master Chief-esque mystique by being a man of few words. He was here to slay fiends, evil ninjas, and my heart in that specific order whenever I wrote steamy fan fiction about our forbidden love. Instead, here, Ryu's happy to yap all day about terrorists, politics, and the best way to style your Bernie tale. The main reason for that is that Tecmo decided to hire a legendary voice actor, Troy Baker, to play the part of... Hey. Stop that. Stop it. Shut up. Yeah, I know. At this point, it's faster to list the video games where Troy Baker hasn't been cast as the main protagonist. But you know what? I love Troy Baker. Yeah, I'm not afraid to say it. You give me Higgs, Joker, or Jake Wesker, and I'm just gonna eat up that performance like it's been dipped in chocolates. But I'll be the first person to admit here, as Ryu, it doesn't really work. And it's not just because he has an American accent. His dad's name is Joe, for God's sake. It's not a bad performance per se. I don't think Troy is physically capable of giving those. It just doesn't really suit the character. Clearly, Tecmo's primary goal with the story of Ninja Gaiden 3 was to flesh out Ryu's character and turn him from a mysterious but shallow entity. Boy, I bet their faces were red when they saw people's adoration for 2016 Doom Guy into a more rounded lean man with depth and nuance. Speaking of which, we're transported into the land of tea and crumpets, so Ryu can get down to the business of stabbing people viciously in the street. A sight so common in 2026 London that he may as well be buying soccer tickets, which is bloody midnight until he comes across a lone terrorist who throws down his weapon and begs for his life while pleading for Ryu to spare him for the sake of his family. This locks us into a sequence where our only option is to slowly and menacingly advance on the defenseless adversary, watching him become more desperate before we cut him down anyway. which somehow manages to assassinate Ryu's character even faster than the former member of the living. Ryu Hayabusa has killed a lot of bad guys across the course of his history, enough to fill a cemetery several times, granted. But it was always painted in the light of kill or be killed. Even those adversaries he dismembered in Ninja Gaiden 2 were a threat who wouldn't hesitate to use their last breath to take Ryu with them. So in the eyes of the player, it was all fair game. But here, suddenly the morality of Ryu's ways were brought into question. He's killing now because, well, actually it's never explained. He's just a jerk, I guess. A sociopath? It's something we'll be revisiting a lot throughout the course of the game, and you're gonna want to see the payoff. From here, you get to do cool stuff like fight a tank and learn how to climb walls, which is, yeah, that's something I'll get into later. Before taking a fun trek through Silent Hill on our way to the boss. Ninja Gaiden 3 is a game all about Ryu and his relationship with the Dragon Sword. And because of that, you only get one weapon throughout the whole game. The Dragon Sword, or its legal, non-union equivalent. That's it. I'm not kidding. If you were prepared to pony up some extra cash for DLC, you could expand Ryu's arsenal a little with the Falcon Claws. But given how we're playing on the original hardware and the Xbox Live Marketplace is 6 feet deep on the 360, our only option is to use one weapon for the entire game. Like, thematically, I get it. You're telling a story about how Ryu needs to justify all the killing that he does, and until he uses to facilitate, that is his most iconic sword. You want the player to feel connected to that, but my guy, this is not how you do it. I'm not a game developer, but even I can tell you that there isn't a single game in existence where you take the tools and abilities away from the player only for them to say, I enjoyed that. It doesn't exist. You're hunting unicorns. And on top of that, there's no upgrades to earn outside of unlocking a few cosmetic and mechanical changes as the story progresses. What you see is what you get from the very start of the game until the final credits roll. And even if you want to argue that new moves do unlock as the story progresses, that doesn't matter when Izuna Drop and Flying Swallow are all you really need to deal with almost anything that the game throws at you. So yeah, combat is not good, which is a weak leg to stand on when your game is built around that core concept. But we're pushing ahead regardless because this is the Academy. And if Dark Water combat was all it took for me to be put off a game, then I would have never beaten Underworld: The Eternal War. Regent of the Mask is our first boss, and I'll give credit where it's due. He likes to talk, but he is fun to listen to. The fight is largely gimmick-driven. He's got a kind of highbrow, classy British accent that just screams, mustache-twirling bad guy. And you know what? Sometimes that's all you need. It's that gimmicky fight that really just has you baiting out attacks to punish, and sending him to Pound Town will earn you a cutscene with the game's biggest twist. Curse have put on Ryu for all those times he flooded the bishop. Sorry, do I need to put that in YouTube-friendly terms? I meant brutally slaughtered people. And his fapping arm is now infused with the dragon blade itself, which sounds metal as hell, but actually just leaves him having a gross scar and being stuck in excruciating amounts of agony whenever the plot demands it. Speaking of which, it's time for a taste of that endless agony, as Ryu has to stumble about blindly from a blast zone of an impending missile strike. This is curiously one of a bunch of parallels which Ninja Gaiden shares with Metal Gear Rising, where both games' protagonists are forced into slow walking sections which probably exist to hide a loading screen. From here, we catch our boy in the mask, delivering a fabulous monologue about blah blah blah, I'm evil, who cares. He's the leader of some fancy pants terrorist group, which is bad news for him, because his carefully worded diatribe about the evils of murder was wasted on Ryu, who clearly doesn't know how to read. But the signal was traced to the middle of nowhere, which means it's time for Ryu to pack his bags, because for some reason we are incapable of sending anyone into an active war zone except for a ninja who doesn't have a sword. He does get a new bow though. And you know what? This is actually the only good idea the whole development team had when designing combat. That's because unlike Ninja Gaiden 2's bow, which you can either aim manually, which takes forever, or fire automatically at the nearest enemy, this bad boy comes with unlimited shots and automatically locks on to your foe. You might say that's not all that impressive, and you would be right, except when it locks on, it has target priority, meaning that it will always lock onto the first enemy who is either flying or using some kind of ranged weapon, usually a a rocket launcher. Oh god, the Ninja Gaiden 2 disease is broken containment, which is exactly who you'd want to be targeting in the heat of combat, the enemies you can't easily hit with a sword. It's nothing that is going to change your life. But in a game stuffed with some truly baffling design choices, it's nice to see one that makes sense and helps keep the flow of combat moving smoothly. Now, call me Darude because we've got a sandstorm blowing in. Except it's Ayane here to lend Ryu a helping hand, by which I mean she's actually gonna give him a sword and off and never be seen again. It's Hayabusa's sword and it's a loader. But for now, this is the only tool we've got besides a bow and some harsh language, so I am not gonna argue. Mechanically, it's identical to the dragon sword, so it doesn't serve much more purpose than buying a new pickaxe skin from the Fortnite shop. From here, we are doing a lot of platforming and enclosed arena fights. To its credit, it does feel like the game is trying to replicate the feel of Ninja Gaiden 2's legendary enemy encounters, of having 10 to 15 enemies on screen all at once. This was a well-known hardware bottleneck for the game though, where on the 360 it simply couldn't handle all the particle and explosion effects at once, causing the game to choke on its own tongue as it tried valiantly to render them all at once, rendering what fans would affectionately refer to as tactical slowdown. Here, the devs seem to have taken a more pragmatic approach. Rather than cut down the number of enemies and just make them tankier like they did in Sigma, they went for a middle road of only having several on screen at any given time, but opted to lock you in an arena where they spawn in waves. This leads to a clown car effect where every time you dispatch an enemy, another spawns to replace it. Your mileage might vary, but for me, this led to a lot of fights just feeling tedious, as you begin to genuinely wonder when the game was going to release you from its grasp and allow you to actually progress. This is compounded by the fact there is no benefit to killing enemies at all. Games like God of War, Devil May Cry, and even previous Ninja Gaiden games all operate on mechanics where killing enemies rewarded you with currency, something you could use to purchase upgrades and enable the player to feel empowered, using their wits and tactics to sculpt the gameplay experience that suits their talents for completing the game. But here, there's no upgrades. Boosts are unlocked automatically as the game progresses. No items to purchase, no skill to learn. There's literally no incentive for engaging with the enemy beyond the fact that they stand between you and the next cutscene. As a result, combat starts to feel very rote and mindless. There's no reason to adjust your strategy, and you can't even change your weapons to spice things up or try a different approach. And I haven't even gotten to the worst of it yet. Bimbo? Neutered. Obliterations? Outdated. Yeah, see, without orbs floating around after every kill, that means you can't do quick charge for your obliteration attack, which means holding down the heavy attack button does nothing. Instead, obliterations are triggered by killing enough enemies that your sword starts to glow red, allowing you to pull off Ryu's famous high-risk, high-reward move. Oh, and if you're planning on saving that charge for a problematic enemy, forget it. Once you've cleared an encounter, that red glow nopes out because even legendary ninja aren't immune to going the distance when it counts. So use it or lose it, buddy. I'm still not done. Ninpo is even worse somehow. Forget different kinds of Ninpo attacks. You now have one Ninpo attack, which is just a canned animation of a giant dragon clearing the screen of enemies. Until the next one spawns, anyway. And the way you fill your bar is killing enemies and performing obliterations. Using your Ninpo restores a decent chunk of health, and is your primary means of healing outside of saving your game at checkpoints. That by itself wouldn't be too bad were it not for the fact that when an encounter is over, you guessed it, any Ninpo you haven't used gets automatically cashed out for your health. You don't get a choice. So again, you can't strategically save your Ninpo for a tough enemy or boss. You just have to use it. The end result is a game whose combat feels bereft of any strategy or player agency. Every time the encounter starts, you're plunged into combat with no Ninpo, no items, one weapon, and no obliteration attack available. You're starting with the bare basics, and have to work your way up from there. It's tedious and boring. With little else you can really say about that feels redeeming. Even your bow is worthless for targeting enemies who are not priority targets, because the damage it inflicts on them feels significantly reduced, or it just bounces off completely. The combat was clearly designed to cater the people who took umbrage with Itagaki's rest in pepperonis, my goat. Get good approach to combat, but they overshot the landing when trying to make it accessible to the point where you could play it in a coma. The game goes out of its way to troll you with possibilities of what might have been by having a jukebox playing the theme of Muramasa's shop, but sadly it's just debating you into yet another combat encounter. Find a helicopter before making your way to the monorail station.
Mono means one, and rail means rail,
enabling us to travel to a lavish new location that looks visually indistinguishable from the one we just left. Kill enough guys here and Ryu will have another bout of Big Sad, forcing you to wander around at a snail's pace while waving your sword around to kill enemies. Again, feels very similar to Metal Gear Rising sections, except there the sections existed because Raiden was in conflict with his own nature as a killer, and trying to rationalize his actions. Here, Ryu does it because, honestly, I have no idea. It happens randomly, leaves randomly, and is rarely mentioned. A buddy in the mask pops up to wax poetic about the nature of murder and the fancy curse he put on Ryu's arm, before deciding to simply lob an attack helicopter at Ryu for our next boss fight. Boss fights in Ninja Gaiden 3 are pretty standard affairs. Except for one weakness I've been sitting on until now. You might have noticed that the boss does not actually have a health buff. This by itself may seem like a trivial matter. After all, plenty of games have bosses with no health buffs. And that is true, but all of those, okay, the good ones, have some form of damage feedback. Damage numbers, visible wounds, flashy lights, blood or sparks, you get the idea. But here, there's little to no feedback to let you know you're doing anything right. Bosses in general throughout the game have the problem where they will respond the same way being hit whether you're attacking in the right or wrong place. This leaves you wondering a lot of the time if you're having any effect at all. Again, not great for your game when it's built around the combat experience. Clip that birdie's wings and we get introduced to Clifford Higgins, a character who curiously looks a lot like Troy Baker while also not being Troy Baker. He has an accent which is almost identical to our master antagonist, but you should just ignore that because it's time to yeet yourself into the jungles of Abysmo Island, which absolutely sounds like the kind of place you are legally required to build your stronghold if you are a supervillain. It's here you get introduced to new and exciting things to kill, like a species of insect which seems curiously attached to Ryu's crotch. Back at the base, the plot is thickening as Cliff explains that our terrorist pals in LOA, the Legion of Alchemists, might be in league with our superiors. Things are afoot and we have absolutely no reason not to trust Clifford. It doesn't matter anyway because this is now a Crash Bandicoot playthrough, since the devs have realized that having one weapon for the entire game was probably a mistake, so we need to spice things up a little before the player's vital signs drop to 0. It's trying to be clever, looking for ways to change up the gameplay just enough to make you forget that there is no punishment for spamming the same text over and over. And unlike Itagaki's previous entries, Steel and Bone executions are now completely random, so any real strategy to the combat is out the window. Like this cute little underground section here. It's pitch black, so you can't see a thing, but it's also throwing legions of those glowing crutch crabs at us, which light the way if you cut them up. It's just enough variety to keep the game moving along without getting too monotonous. Make it through all that somehow, and we transition straight from underground jungle caves into an Umbrella-style secret laboratory. I told you, it's an evil lair on Abysmo Island filled with cultists trying to resurrect an old god with alchemy. Unit Tull just had a better grip on rationality. To prove it, our favorite man in the mask is back to remind us that his favorite song is listening to his own goddamn voice, because he is going on a rant about cloning dinosaurs for children's toys. It doesn't really matter, it's all just window dressing that never comes up again because the devs wanted a boss fight where you fight a giant dinosaur, and this was the only way to make it happen. The fight sucks because there's still no health bar, no visual feedback, but with the added frustration that it's the first boss where you have to aim for a weak spot to damage it. If you're not hitting him in the head, congratulations, you are wasting your time. But there's no way to know that because he still flinches and bleeds no matter where you hit him, so good luck figuring that one out. If tedium is your taboo of choice, then you are in luck. One more Crash Bandicoot section later, and we're onto phase 2 of the fight, where it's just phase 1, but more of it. So enjoy chowing down on that nothing burger. Take Dinobot down, and Mystery Man is back with another delightfully erudite diatribe about how Ryu is a killer, and killing is all he is good at, which Ryu curiously agrees to by promising to kill him too. Seriously, the story of this game makes absolutely no sense. It's supposed to be a reflection on how Ryu is a man who always used the ends to justify the means. He'd kill 1,000 people to save 1,000,000. It tries to humanize those people by having enemies plead and beg for their lives at different moments so that he can appreciate how every life is precious, no matter who it belongs to. Again, this is something that comes up in Metal Gear Rising a number of times, but is handled better there because Jack realizes it is in his nature to kill. He's made peace with that, so long as his sword is always being wielded to protect the innocent. Here it just goes nowhere. The sword was bound to Ryu's arm as punishment for his sins, but instead of reflecting on that, he just keeps killing people, threatening to kill more people, and killing people who are completely defenseless because that's just how he do. There's no reflection, no lessons learned. He's been slapped over the wrists and told that killing is bad, and his solution is to keep killing people until there's no one left to remind him of that fact. Anyway, Ryu is in a virtual world now, which is a great excuse to throw some levels at us from better Ninja Gaiden games, like the airship from 1 and the opening area from 2. But if you can bust out of there, you will find things get very Resident Evil, with a whole bunch of naked guys who either turn to weird purple snake things or a weird monkey thing. Both of them are far too tanky, can't be Izuna dropped, and spam command grabs like you owe them money. The only saving grace of this fight is that, mercifully, this is the only time in the whole stage where you need to fight them. Nah, I'm just kidding. They're mixed into every encounter from here on out. But if you can push through all that, you'll encounter a scientist who seems to exist to show Ryu that the people he's killing aren't just strawmen. They're real people with families and children. Again. Who can choose to see the error of their actions and assist Ryu on his righteous quest. Of course, the only reason any character will exposit this much heart-wrenching backstory is so they can get their face blown off with Chekhov's gun. And that's exactly what happens here less than 2 minutes later. The only irony here is that Ryu wasn't actually the one who punched his ticket. A fact I'm sure eats away at him to this very day. To keep the character development train running on time, Ryu will bump into Kana, daughter of Mizuki, who exists to be a walking plot device. No, seriously, she can't even talk. I don't think she's passing the Bechdel test anytime soon. Turns out she was kidnapped because apparently she is the only suitable host for the new god these jokers are trying to conjure into the world. Also, our boy in the mask has to double-cross his head scientist and transform her into a weird proto-god hybrid. Because, let's face it, he would not be much of an evil mastermind if he didn't. The good news here is that even though it's a boss fight, you're not stuck trying to find weak points. So it's a lot less painful than our Dino pal a few stages back. Just keep cutting her arms off until she realizes that a life without choking is not a life worth living. And you will close out the chapter. This all leads to the most hilarious cutscene in the whole game, where we somehow find ourselves on an aircraft carrier with Ryu and Mizuki getting chewed out by a captain for trying to play hero. This is all weirdly surreal because besides the image of a fully dressed ninja just standing there and being yelled at, Ryu is just weirdly okay with being dressed down by a man who has absolutely no authority over him. It's peak comedy and I am here for it. Which is good because it's time for more character development anyway. And Kana has to prove she took one too many blows to the head back at the laboratory because now she's asking Ryu to be her dad? Which, if that line doesn't work for me with a hen's night stripper, it shouldn't work for her either. From there, Ryu's off to Mount Fuji to grab Genshin's sword after he left it behind in the end of Ninja Gaiden 2, because honestly, I don't know. There was nothing wrong with Hayabusa's sword, but it is an upgrade mechanically, mostly allowing us to hit up to 5 enemies when the game feels like allowing us to do an obliteration attack. I'd also argue thematically that having his sword taken away from him because he killed too many people with it, only to replace it with a sword of a man who killed just as many people in the service of fiends, is not a great look when trying to argue that you're the good guy. On this journey, you'll come across a nifty rope bridge, which when it gets taken out, you're forced to swing and climb across. Yeah, it is time to talk about the climbing mechanics. Clearly, when stripping every weapon out of this game, the devs realized they need to replace it with something else in order to keep the gameplay feeling fresh and engaging. You can't just take gameplay out without replacing it with something else. It's just one of those things. So anyway, one of the devs said, what if we add in sections all throughout the game where the action grinds to a complete standstill so the player can mash left and right trigger in order to slowly traverse the level? And I hope to God that man got a promotion, a cash bonus, and free jobs for life. Because climbing sections are everywhere in Ninja Gaiden 3. They are an absolute plague on this game that crops up several times per mission. I don't know if they're in there for a technical reason like trying to mask a load from the player, but they are the absolute worst. And the game is designed so that you can't try to input the motions too fast because Ryu will just fall off and you'll have to start again. Yes, please game, take away my fast-paced spectacle action, I don't want it anymore. This whole section just exists to remind you of better Ninja Gaiden games. After that, we're back to fighting the Black Spider Ninja Clan here, like the game is trying to apologize for not being Ninja Gaiden 2. And it damn well better, because these guys are a pushover. They need to apologize to their ancestors, who Ryu probably slaughtered as well, because if I'm not ready to eat my own hands in frustration fighting basic enemy mobs, can you really call it a Ninja Gaiden game? It's also just weird because it feels like little more than a thinly veiled excuse to throw in a Momiji cameo. Hey, stop cheering. Christy is the best DOA girl, and I will not hear arguments otherwise. And the giant fiend boss, because this is a Ninja Gaiden game, so we should probably fight fiends at some point. Ryu's back at the aircraft carrier now to prove the whole chapter could have been cut and nobody would have noticed. Also, our counter is going to do more cute and incredibly endearing stuff, so you know nothing bad is going to happen to her. So we're off to Antarctica because we've literally used every other biome in Minecraft up to this point and are running out of options. Anyway, another day, another secret Alchemist base. Honestly, at this point, Umbrella is going to need to consider legal action, because you can only have so many off-the-books hidden underground genetic research laboratories before you start infringing on their brand. Wesker is very litigious. He makes Nintendo look like Girl Scouts. Do not test him. It doesn't matter though, because Ryu's gotta fight his own evil twin in what was probably another casualty of this game's half-hearted attempt to have some kind of message about how he's battling his murderous impulses and trying to overcome them. Seriously, there is no attempt made to explain this beyond alchemy, and none of it matters anyway, because Cliffy Higgins is here to reveal that he was playing us like a damn fiddle the whole time. Yep, it is treason season, and Clifford is busting out a heel turn early because it is the third act and the story has yet to progress beyond beating the player over the head with murder equals bad. So we get a lore drop about how his granddad is running the Lord's Alchemy, and that's all the reason he needs to turn to a complete tool bag and try to destroy the world. We don't get time to discuss it any further anyway, because our evil twin is back and mugging on us with a cooler skin he got in a loot box. Probably. He also gets to use weapons that are not the Dragon Sword, which I find genuinely offensive because it means he's having more fun playing this game than I am. Is a gimmick fight anyway. Just wail on him till he turns red and he can do an obliteration attack to put him in a pine box. If only it was that easy to kill all my personal demons. For that, we get a callback to the original Ninja Gaiden 2 on the NES, where Robert T. Sturgeon makes a cameo as Ryu jumps from one fighter jet to another, purely because there's an hour of gameplay left and he's had shockingly few chances to Orifon. From here, we get to move from battleship to battleship, which sounds cool on paper until you realize we're just running around copied and pasted card always in flight decks, taking out waves of enemies before destroying an anti-air turret or two and repeating the process. The whole game has Ryu constantly either fighting the military or fighting with the military. And it feels like Tecmo was just making the same mistake Capcom did in this era by thinking that appealing to Western gamers meant copying Call of Duty. How else do you explain going from fighting giant zombie skeletons in the first game to terrorists and faceless soldiers in the third? This all culminates in an absolutely incredible cutscene, where Clifford's granddad shows up to fight Ryu in a wheelchair, but somebody passed him a white mustard before the fight started, so Ryu is completely fine. And once the fight is over, of course it wouldn't be on brand if Ryu didn't murder him in cold blood while he posed no threat to us whatsoever. You'd think killing a boss would be the reason for a change of scenery, but we're just going back to fighting waves of the same soldier enemies, killing more people in cold blood, before we get to fight the Masked Man one more time, because if this game knows how to do anything, it's repeat itself. If you think he's learned any new tricks, prepare to be disappointed, because the boss fight is exactly the same as every other time you fought him. But wait, plot twist. The Masked Man was actually Kara's father and Clifford's brother, killed by Clifford and brought back to life so he could be mind-controlled by the Lords of Alchemy because, God, I really don't know at this point. The story already has more twists than a pretzel and we're not even done yet, because Kara saw the whole thing and regained the ability to speak just in time to curse Ryu, metaphorically this time, as a murderer and get turned into a weird giant naked god thing that we saw in the prologue. Now, Ryu feels just awful about effectively being responsible for the death of Mizuki's whole family at this point, so he's off to go save Kana and the world, I suppose. Look, Ryu's got priorities here, but you'll be fighting your way through a destroyed city to do it. And the game is gonna throw pretty much everything it has at you in a bit of a greatest hits compilation of every Borg enemy you've had to cut down up to this point. QTE shows up one last time too. Really? Okay, sure. He decides to commit to the bit and actually turn himself into a Resident Evil boss. Because being a weird crystal beast thing is gonna be totally normal and not weird at all once Connor is done trashing the whole world. So he wants to get in early. I'd say he just wants an excuse to jerk it with 4 arms instead of 2, but without a crutch, that is gonna be challenging. The fight ends with the kill being stolen by Connor's father, who is back from the dead again without explanation.
Oh no, he's hot!
But now helping us because he's still upset about that whole being murdered thing. The first time, not the second. Try to keep up. Fight your way across the rooftops and our new husbando will, say it with me now, backstab us from nowhere and turn on Ryu because he's decided that he can't let Ryu kill his daughter to save the world. If you're thinking to yourself that you're getting whiplash from watching people change their allegiances in this game, then you have not seen anything yet. Because defeating him in yet another recycled boss fight reveals that he wasn't actually trying to kill Ryu and needed Ryu to kill him so he could remove the grip of murder curse. I think? Ryu mentions that he wanted this, like it was part of his plan all along. But I gave up trying to understand what was happening back when we were fighting a giant cyborg dinosaur. Besides, Theodore Higgins has died so many times up to this point that chances of him actually staying dead are statistically impossible. From here, it's all full circle. We fight the new god that's actually Kana, circling back to that nifty little bit of foreshadowing back at the start of the game. And since Ryu is the true dragon sword now, thanks to his curse being released, he gets the added bonus of not actually killing Kana since Muramasa just mentioned a little earlier that the dragon sword can't kill anything that isn't truly evil. So I guess we're operating on Samurai Jack logic now. You get to fight her on a collapsing rooftop with some very questionable hitboxes on some of her attacks. But before you know it, the whole thing will be over with the goddess being sliced open and Kana being saved, along with the rest of the world. Game over. Good guys win, bad guys lose. High fives all around. Good job. Oh, and that whole subplot about Ryu being a murderer and the human cost of his actions weighing on his soul? Yeah, it's all good. See, Government Man from the opening cutscene shows up to tell us that we're not a murderer. So I guess we can just quit worrying about that. Oh man, I was really worried that was building up to something. Ryu was actually in danger of having character development for a moment there. He disappeared because that's what ninjas do, and that's it. You've beaten Ninja Gaiden 3, the cursed original version, the Star Wars Holiday Special of Ninja Gaiden. And you know what? I 100% totally agree with Tecmo's decision to memory hole this game. Unlike Ninja Gaiden 2, where the original version disappeared because of mismanagement and general incompetence, Tecmo didn't want anyone to play this version of 3 because it's a goddamn snooze fest. Now look, I have my own issues with Razor's Edge, which I can make a video about if there's any interest. Is it too late for a like and subscribe call to action? I'll tell you one thing, it's not boring. And that is the cardinal sin that 3 commits. It's just repetitive, slow, and tedious, with the edges sand off to the point that it's an amorphous blob. I've seen playthroughs of Subway Surfers that were more engaging to the player. So yeah, don't play this. The good news is that is incredibly difficult to do by accident, so you're in the clear there. There's really no other low points in the series that I can cover. So if I wind up making a follow-up, then it's all smooth sailing until... shit. There's still Yaiba, isn't there?